Hello everyone, welcome to RBI Grade B 2026 Special Descriptive Series, and this is the part 4 of this video. And before we begin the session, I hope my voice is audible to all of you. Just confirm it in the chat box if I'm audible to everyone. Yes, so there is no problem with the audio. There could be some issue with the video because of, my camera is not working properly. So that's why my video is off. But I hope you're able to listen me properly. The audio is fine. So we are going to discuss the session today, right? And today's topic is basically the recent report that has been released by UNCTAD, right? It has been released by UNCTAD, and the name of the report is 2026 World Investment Report. Now, this report was released in the month of June only and could be important for your examination because the theme of the report also aligns with your syllabus. And if you see the releasing body also, then it is United Nations, right? So let us discuss one by one. So as a part of today's session, first of all, we are going to discuss the key highlights of this report. We are going to see the key highlights. Secondly, we are also going to see that what does this report say about India, right? So we are going to discuss the Indian context also with respect to this report. So we are going to discuss these things one by one. So let us begin. And this is the introduction as far as today's agenda is concerned, that is World Investment Report 2026. So the World Investment Report 2026 titled International Investment in a Turbulent Era. So this is the name of the report, and it highlights a fundamental transformation in the global investment landscape. Then, although global foreign direct investment recovered in 2025, the recovery was fragile, uneven, and increasingly concentrated. Now, this is the most important, or I would say this is the entire crux of this report. Because if you will see this report at the end of the reading, you will realize that the report says that the growth is happening. No doubt, the growth is happening. But the problem is that the growth that is there, it is highly uneven and it is concentrated. When I say concentrated, I mean to say that it is concentrated either in few sectors or concentrated in certain regions only, right? We will talk about it later on when we will be discussing the various points with respect to it highlights. But this is the problem that has been highlighted, that growth is happening, no doubt regarding it. At the global level, the growth is happening, but if I talk about this growth is highly uneven, it is fragile, which means that it is not very much resilient to external shocks, and lastly, it is highly concentrated to few sectors or regions only. And it says that investment decisions at the global level, they are no longer guided primarily by production cost and efficiency, but they are increasingly shaped by what? They are shaped by industrial policy, technological competition, geopolitical alignment, economic security, and supply chain resilience, which basically means that those days are gone when basically the things like FDI and other forms of investments, they used to happen based upon the production cost and efficiency. But nowadays, in the times of geopolitics, or I would say geostrategic globalization, the thing that is happening is that the investments are influenced by other factors too, which can include the industrial policy of the nation, which can include the technological competition that is there because it is clearly linked to innovation. Then geopolitical alignment also, which reflects the stability of the nation. Then the economic security and supply chain resilience too. Based on these factors, the investments are decided, right? We will understand it later on in a detailed manner when we will be discussing the body part. So let us discuss the first point as highlighted in the report. And the first point is that fragile recovery in global FDI, right? And what does the report say? The report says that the global FDI increased by 6% from approximately $1.5 trillion in 2024 to $1.6 trillion in 2025. So this is the extent up to which I would say the increase has happened, which is of up to 6%. But the report says that this is not the real increase that has happened. When I say real increase, I mean to say that, see, when the investment is happening, right? No doubt, when the investment is happening, so it can include two type of things. First of all, as a part of global investment, it can include the new investments that are happening, right? Which you can say as a part of the FDI. Secondly, there can be financial routing also sometimes. And this financial routing can also be confused with FDI when you're reading it just on the papers, right? So on the papers, this financial routing might seem like a new type of investment that is happening, but in the reality it is not an investment. And excluding once you're excluding these type of flows, these financial routing flows from this entire FDI, right, the FDI increase that is happening, then you will see that the report says that, however, after excluding the conduit flows from major European financial sector, the increase was only 4% only. So even though the global FDI flows increased by 6%, but if I talk about the real increase is 4% only. What type of financial routing I'm talking about over here? For example, it can include company restructuring. Company restructuring. What do I mean by company restructuring? By company restructuring, I mean to say that, for example, let us say if there's a big MNC, right? This MNC is an American MNC, right? Let us say a US based MNC that is there. Now, this MNC, let us say, it has a subsidiary in India. It has a subsidiary in India. And let us say on papers what happened is that basically this subsidiary's ownership has transferred from US to let us say a UK based company, right? The subsidiary is in India only. But what has happened? Basically, the transfer of ownership has happened from US based subsidiary to the UK based subsidiary. Now, if you see it on the papers, what will you see on the papers? On the paper, you will see that US based company has done disinvestment in India, right? Whereas UK based company has done the FDI. But if I ask you a question, that has this form of FDI, has it led to creation of new jobs? The answer is no, right? Has it led to the creation of new machinery or other type of new capital assets or new factory? The answer is no. So are you going to consider it as a real form of FDI? The answer is no, right? And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying financial routing, right? It can be in different type of scenario. This is just a one example. It can also be, for example, in case of intra-group transfer. When I say intra-group transfer, I mean to say the money that is transferred between companies that are belonging to, say, business. So in this case also, you might feel on the paper that the FDI flows have gone up, but basically it is nothing. At the end of the day, this is nothing, but it is just internal financial movement, right? So that is something what I mean to say when I'm saying that the real increase in FDI is 4% only. Even if we say that it is 6%, but if we exclude these type of flows, this type of financial routing, then it is 4%. I hope it is clear to you that what is the rationale behind it when we say 4%, right? And apart from that, as I told you, that if I talk about the global growth, right, global investment growth, then no doubt it is increasing, but at the same time it is fragile and also it is uneven. How it is uneven? I told you that, for example, you can see if I talk about the FDI inflows in developed economies, then it is increased by 11%. If you see inflows in developing economies, then it is increased only by 2%, right? Can you see the difference that is there? Apart from that, if I talk about the lower middle income economies, here you can see the decline. It is not even increasing, right? While low income economy, they recorded a 10% increase from a very small base. So what you are able to conclude from here? You can easily conclude that the growth is highly uneven and it is concentrated in few countries or few type of economies only, right? It is not inclusive at all. So that is what we mean about the first point, which says that the fragile recovery that is there in case of global FDI. I hope it is clear, right? And thus the headline growth conceals continuing weakness in productive international investment, right? So this is something that you can conclude as a part of it. Now let us move on to second point. The second point is regarding investment growth was driven by few strategic sectors. Now this is also reflecting what? It is reflecting the concentration of investment growth in few sectors only. For example, the report says that the rise in announced project values was largely driven by data centers and artificial intelligence infrastructure, because this is something, an area where the investments have been increasing because of the high innovation, and it is a new type of technology. So what the different countries, the different economies that are doing, they are basically creating more and more infrastructure, right? So that basically this artificial intelligence is, it can also play important role as a part of their economic growth as well as the employment, right? And apart from that, if you see, the second major sector can be oil and gas and the semiconductor projects, because these you can say semiconductor project, it is very important for the economy, right? So over here we are witnessing more and more, I would say, investments at the global level, right? And it is also because of the demand and supply factors, right? But if I talk about other sectors, for example, renewable energy, for example, infrastructure avenues other than data centers, or several basic manufacturing industries, over here the report says that the investment has remained weak or it has declined, right? So over here the investments have declined. So again, what you can say that the growth that has happened, it is largely driven by few sectors only, which means that it is highly uneven in nature, right? So this is what the report says. And it says that strategic sectors such as AI infrastructure, semiconductors, critical minerals, advanced technology and energy transition technologies, it accounted for almost half of announced greenfield investment that have happened in 2025. And that is the reason, that you see over here, that these sectors, they are largely, these are the sectors that are largely driving the investments, right? So I hope it is clear to you. Now the third point. The third point is regional performance. Now let us see that how on the basis of region the report says that the investments have remained uneven, right? So it says that if I talk about the primary driver, the principal driver of global investment increase, then it is Europe, right? So region wise it is Europe. You can see the FDI inflows have increased by 39% to $285 billion, right? But on the other hand, if I talk about Asia, if you see developing Asia, then it has received $644 billion, but the increase was 3% only as compared to the previous investments, right? On the other hand, if you see the Latin America and Caribbean, the investments have increased by 14%, right? But what I want to show you is that basically, if you see Africa, in case of Africa, it is 70 billion only, right? Which represents what? It represents a decline from the high record that they have witnessed in 2024. So as compared to 2024, the investments have fallen significantly, right? So $70 billion is there. You can see a huge difference is there. 285 billion, 644 billion, and here it is just 70 billion, right? So a lot of, I would say, unevenness is there when it comes to comparing the regional economies, right? So that is again another point. Now point number 4. Point number 4 is that says that FDI into least developed countries, it has increased but again remained concentrated. So you can see two things over here. First of all, in one way you can divide Europe, you can divide Asia, and you can divide Africa primarily, right? If you are able to divide into this segment. Now if you open Africa also, right, if you will subdivide Africa, here also you will see some sort of concentration or unevenness with respect to growth, right? So you will see that certain countries are there who are able to get the benefit, right, where basically they are able to show high growth investment, but certain other countries are there who are not able to reap the benefits, right? Investment is still poor in these areas. So you can see that at the larger level also you can see this divergence, and at the smaller scale also, that is within the regions also, you are able to see this concentration, this unevenness that is there with respect to the foreign direct investments. So let us see what the report says. So the report says that FDI flows to least developed countries, the LDCs that are there, it rose by 21% overall, right? But mainly because of large investment in a few countries. So it is concentrated to what? Few countries only. For example, countries like Guinea, Mozambique, right? Uganda, these type of countries that are there. And similarly, investment in small island developing states also, right? Again, the small developing countries that are there. Over here, the growth was concentrated in few sectors only. For example, Maldives, it attracted major tourism and airport projects. And Cabo Verde, right? You must have heard about Cabo Verde. It was there in FIFA also this year, right? You must be knowing about this country, and it played very well. So anyways, so while Cabo Verde and Sao Tome and Principe, it received infrastructure related investment. So you can see over here also, even if the investment is happening, it is generated in few sectors only, right? So a lot of unevenness and divergence is there. Now, fifth point. Fifth point is regarding the fact that investment in sustainable goal sectors improve evenly. Now, the report says that basically when we are able to compare the investments in different countries with the sustainable development goals. So over here also, I would say it is increasing, but again, in what manner? In an uneven manner, right? And that is why in the starting of the report only I told you what I told you, that this report says that the entire global investment that is happening, it is fragile, it is uneven, and it is concentrated, and you can see it in all the dimensions, whatever dimensions the report is discussing, right? So for example, it says that the value and number of projects connected with sustainable development goals, it increased in developing economies. However, again, this recovery was what? It was concentrated in few sectors and countries only, right? For example, project values increased in infrastructure and agri-food systems, while investment remained weak in areas, for example, water, sanitation, hygiene, health and education, renewable energy. So over here, the investment is still compromised, right? And what does it indicates? It indicates that continued difficulties in mobilizing finance for smaller economies and socially important projects, right? We know that health is important, education is important, water, sanitation, hygiene is important, right? All these factors are important for providing a better standard of living to the population, to the individuals, right, in order to extract the maximum potential of human capital. So but what is happening? We are facing continued difficulties over there, right? So in infrastructure, agri-food, it is increasing, it is also important, but at the same time these social indicators and these investments are also important, right? So I hope it is clear to you. And here what we are seeing again the unevenness that is there. Now the point number 6. The point number 6 says that the investor landscape is becoming more diverse, right? So it says that it is getting more diverse. And in what sense it is getting diverse? Let me tell you that the report says that if I talk about the global investments in the early scenario, global investments in the early scenario, then it was mainly undertaken by traditional private multinational companies that are there, right? But now what is happening? The report says that two other type of investors, they are also becoming more important, right? Which are those two other type of investors? Firstly, it is state owned multinational companies, which basically means that those type of companies that are fully or partially owned by the government, right, that invest in foreign countries. Secondly, it also includes private equity funds, right? private equity fund Private equity firms. So private equity firms basically means the investment firms that acquire ownership stake in companies, right? And they may later on sell those stakes also. So over here what we are witnessing this diversification, which basically means that the contribution of other participants apart from the traditional private multinational companies, it is increasing. So let us see what the report says. It says that as I told you, that the traditional multinational enterprises remain important, but state owned multinational enterprises and private equity investors, they are playing a larger role. More than one fourth of the companies included in Unitad's 2026 ranking of the top 100 multinational enterprises, they were what? They were state owned. So you can see that it is now it is not just about private multinational companies, but I would say the state owned companies that are there, they are also competing. They are also coming as a part of this ranking, and you can see they have taken the space of one fourth among the top 100 multinational enterprises in the UN CTAT's ranking, right? And international equity acquisitions by private equity firms, they accounted for approximately 20% of global mergers and acquisitions. So you can see the increase in their relevance, right? Now point number 7. Now point number 7 says that the investor landscape is becoming more okay. So I think by mistake I've repeated this point twice. Yes. So let us move on to point number 7. So the point number 7 is uh, investment policy making reached a recorded level, which basically mean that, see, the thing is that different governments that are there in different countries, what they are doing, they are trying their best so that they are able to offer incentives to the companies so that investments gets increased. Apart from that, what they are doing, they are basically simplifying their procedures, right? And they have opened up their sectors for the investments, right? Different sectors they have opened up. For example, I would say the clean energy sector, for example, the digital infrastructure, for example, critical mineral sector, right? So different countries, they're opening up their economies so that investments can be done in these sectors too. But at the same time, the restrictions are also increasing. In what type of sectors the restrictions are increasing? Basically, the governments are concerned that some private investment, they could basically provide foreign investors with control over strategic sectors also, right? Or those type of sectors that should be there under the but that should be primarily under the control of state only. For example, it can include certain type of sensitive technologies, right? Or any kind of, I would say, critical infrastructure related investments that are there, right? Or some sort of artificial intelligence where government wants to have more control in order to have governance in the best possible manner. Or it can include some strategic minerals too, right? That can be important for the state. So government does not want the contribution of foreign investment over there. So in these areas, the government is what they're doing. The governments are adding restrictions, right? So it is balanced up to a huge extent. On one side, basically, there are favorable measures that have been taken by the government in certain sectors, but in other type of sectors that are sensitive sectors or the strategic sectors, over here the government is adding what? It is adding restrictions. And the report says what? The report says that the governments adopted a record number of investment related policy measures in 2025. A very important point, right? So you can see that the ease of doing business globally, we are witnessing improvement with respect to that, and most measures remained favorable to investors, but restrictions and regulatory scrutiny also increased, which is the second point I told you, particularly in sectors connected with national security and strategic technologies. And consequently, investment promotion and investment control now operate simultaneously, which means country provides incentives for desired investment while screening or restricting investment that may create security or technological vulnerabilities, right? So over here we are seeing some sort of balance over here. Now let us see the conclusion. So the conclusion says that the World Investment Report 2026 shows that global investment recovered in 2025, but the recovery remained fragile and concentrated in a few sectors, countries and mega projects. Investment decisions are increasingly driven by technology, industrial policy, economic security, and supply chain resilience rather than only low cost. And developing countries, what they need to do as a part of way forward, they must strengthen infrastructure, skills, domestic suppliers, and regional integration to enter emerging value chains. Otherwise, what will happen? The changing investment landscape may widen global disparities, which means more and more divergence and inequality and unevenness will be there instead of promoting inclusive development, right? Now, apart from that, let me also tell you that report talks about India also, although it is not there as a part of the question, but I'm just giving you as an extra information so that if you have some scope or word limit in the examination, you can always write this point, right? So let me briefly discuss what it says about India. I would say majority of the information is highly straightforward. So first of all, it says there is strong increase in FDI flows in case of India, and you can see in the rank of India too. So India has moved from 13th position to 11th position, right, among the world's largest FDI recipients. So that is why India's FDI inflows, it has increased by 44%, right, which is a positive sign. Secondly, India strengthened its position as a major investment destination also. So the report says that India continued to strengthen its position as a major investment destination. Its investment strategy aims to broaden investment beyond services, accelerate advanced manufacturing and developing infrastructure, and deepening India's integration into global value chains, right? And India is continue to attract investment in different sectors like in services, manufacturing, and supply chain reconfiguration. So, which basically, so the report is basically appreciating India up to a huge extent. Firstly, it is giving some fact, and lastly, it is saying that India has strengthened its position in different type of major destinations, which include service sector, manufacturing sector, and supply chain configuration, right? Now it also appreciates, it also acknowledges, I would say, it also acknowledges major policy initiatives that have supported investment in India, that include programs like Make in India, Stand Up India, National Industrial Corridor Development Program, and Production Linked Incentive Scheme too, right? So these type of schemes, they have played huge contribution in order to increase the investments. Fourthly, it also talks about investment facilitation regulatory reforms. So reforms such as national single window system, which promotes ease of doing business for the private investors, right? Then India Industrial Land Bank also, which helps in mapping, right? Helps in mapping with respect to different companies where they can do their greenfield investments. Then reduction of regulatory burdens and reformed FDI regime also. So these regulatory reforms that have been brought, they have also played major contributory role in order to increase the FDI as a part of Indian economy. Then the next point. The next point is India as a source of outward FDI. So India is not just a source of inward FDI as we have seen, where the rank has increased from 13th to 11th, but it is an important source of outward FDI too, where it says that India's outward FDI increased approximately from $24 billion in 2024 to $36 billion in 2025. तो हमारा FDI हर एंगल से अच्छा ही हो रहा है, इनवर्ड FDI भी अच्छा हो रहा है, आउटवर्ड FDI भी अच्छा हो रहा है, राइट? and India moved from 20th position in 2024 to 18th position among the largest outward investing companies in 2025, right? So again, a healthy sign that is there, and services remain resilient. Service sector again, it has dominated, and where it says that greenfield investment, which means the fresh investments that have been happening in services sector, it remained stable, right? And you can see the data also where the services investment stood approximately $46 billion in 2024, and it increased slightly to about $47 billion in 2025, right? So 1 billion increase that is there. And ICT, information and communication technology, became India's largest investment sector in 2025, right? So I would say most of the information is highly factual. There is nothing much to explain. That's why I'm reading these points. But of course, if you're targeting this 2026 RBI attempt, so this report could be important, right? Released very recently and very relevant as far as your examination is concerned. So that is it from my end, and I hope the session was effective for you. Let me see the chat box if there are any questions. Okay.